My name is Amy McInnes. This is The Art of Plenty. I am an entrepreneur. I am a mother of 5. I am a registered clinical counselor, and I am a person who has dealt with anxiety in their life and has also treated anxiety in my professional life. This episode is a part of my anxiety mini-series. I decided to create a few episodes about anxiety because I shared my story of my panic disorder and my experience of anxiety, and I recorded this episode. And as soon as it was recorded, I couldn't release it. I was feeling the weight of everything I shared, and can I just say that anxiety sucks? It's awful, and it's crippling, and it erodes hope. And the process of going through that recording and sharing my story, it brought up a lot of emotion for me. And I felt like I didn't want to live through it again. And I felt like if I shared it, it was almost like I was going to be living through it again. And I didn't want to experience that again. And I didn't want to feel the weight of that again. So I said to the team, hold off, I don't want to release this yet. And then I was mulling it over because I know in my bones that the experiences that I've had, that the life that I live as a mother of 5, as a person who's been married over 20 years, as an entrepreneur with multiple businesses, some that have completely failed and others that have been very successful, and my work and my education as a counselor, I know that these experiences and that the life that I'm living can be a source of strength for others. It can be a source of inspiration. And I know that my ability to articulate my experiences is a way that other people can find hope. So I was struggling because I'm not very public. I would say that even in my family, most people don't know that I dealt with anxiety in this way. And when I was going through it, hardly anyone knew. I was extremely private. And I think things like anxiety, like depression, like self-harm thoughts, those are things that we don't want to share because we feel broken. And we lose our ability to connect with others because we feel like there's a part of us that's so wrong. And when we talk about it, we feel like we're giving it, or I felt like I'm giving it more value than I want to. So even though there were times when it was completely felt like it was running my life, I didn't want to give it more power by talking about it or by sharing it. And so when I was reflecting on how come I'm not sharing this episode, if I know that my experiences can help lead to other people's freedoms, I decided that I was going to create more episodes about this. I was going to create more episodes about anxiety because my story is one piece, but the strategies that I implemented and the understanding of how anxiety works in the body are other ways that people can increase their hope in this area, that people can experience freedom. So I've been recording more episodes about anxiety. And this episode today is talking about what actually is going on in the body. Because when we understand what is at work, we are more able to come at it and deal with it in a way that we can overcome. Because that's what we're supposed to do with anxiety. We're not trying to eliminate stressors from our life, because even things that are great, even things that we put in, even things that we are excited about can be a stressor and can cause an anxious reaction. So it's not about eliminating that. It's about learning to overcome it, because everyone experiences it. And if we can learn how to overcome then we can have greater freedom in our life. So that's why understanding what is actually happening is so important. Did you know, and this is a statistic, so take this with a grain of salt if you understand how statistics work. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm meaning when I say take this with a grain of salt. But medical research attributes as much as 90% of illness as stress-related. Can you imagine 90% of illness connected to stress? Now, we've just said that we're not going to be eliminating the stressor. There are certainly stressors that you can and should eliminate, but we're not eliminating all stressors in our life. So what we do need to do is figure out strategies that we can implement that help us to respond to those stressors in a way that doesn't result in illness. That's the goal, right? Here's another stat for you. 43% of all adults in the Western world suffer from the effects of stress. That's a lot. Now, notice the word suffer. So that doesn't talk about who's experiencing stress but we're talking that they're actually suffering from it. Those are big numbers. And 61% of adults reported feeling anxious. So to me, when I hear those numbers, I think this is something we need to get a handle on. And the beautiful thing lately in our world is we talk about mental health so much more. And I want to differentiate. There is a difference between anxiety and clinical disorders that are anxiety disorders. Not everybody that experiences anxiety has a clinical disorder. You could implement all of these strategies at home and still not feel like you're really cracking into it, that you're not really shifting things. That might be an indication that you need professional help, that you need to go see someone because it might fall more into the realm of disorder. Now, what I have noticed is that if you see a medical doctor, they more likely go down the route of prescription because they are able to prescribe. When you go down the route of a counselor or a mental health therapist, they do not prescribe. So a psychiatrist, yes, but a mental health professional doesn't necessarily, and most often if they're counselors and not psychiatrists, we do not prescribe. I'm a counselor, I do not prescribe medication. So the strategies that we use to deal with anxiety are very different than what you would get in a doctor's office. Now, I am not saying which route that you should go. That is really up for you to decide. What I'm bringing this forward is to encourage you is that there's multiple ways to look at this, and there are a lot of ways to have success to deal with anxiety. Okay, let's talk about what actually is going on in the body when this is happening, because anxiety is often physiological, but our response to stress isn't just going to be physiological. It can also be mental. It can also be emotional. And I do have a worksheet that you can get if you go to the show notes about figuring out where your response to stress comes from and what it looks like. Okay, so what actually happens in the body when stress comes and anxiety is reacting? Well, first of all, we're talking about an exposure to a stressor. So something is happening in our life and we get exposed to stress. When that happens, your body responds by releasing hormones. Now, can I just say, this is a simplistic example of what's going on in the body. I'm not nerding out on the physiological process. I want to give you just kind of a basic overall view. And if you are into finding out this information, look it up online because there is a ton in there that you can dig into to get more details on this. Okay, so there's a release of hormones that happen in the body that produce physiological changes. So most of us talk about this, and you've probably heard this. This is what we're talking about when we say fight or flight. And I've recently heard people add freeze to that. So your response to that hormone in your body is running away from the problem or the stressor, fighting the problem, or freezing and not being able to do anything. Now, here's the not so great part of the system. We don't often determine the severity of the threat. Oftentimes, it's not a life or death situation that is evoking this physiological change, that is evoking this hormonal change. So, work stress, often not life and death. Noise pollution, which is just a lot of sound, that can be a stressor that creates that hormonal change. Things going on with your family, even the things that you are thinking, whether it's about your past or your future, can trigger this physiological response. And sometimes, in fact, I think a lot of times when it comes to an anxiety, is that we will turn this system on even when we don't need it, even when we're not really threatened. Now, this system that's getting turned on is your automatic nervous system because it's automatic. It automatically turns on when a stressor shows up. It just happens. And your adrenal glands start to pump out adrenaline. Now, I don't know if you know what it feels like. Maybe you've never really noticed what the adrenaline feels like. But we're talking about extra blood moving towards the muscles. We're talking about your blood pressure going up, your pulse increasing. You're getting extra oxygen to your brain, which is increasing your alertness. You've got rapid breathing. So once the initial surge of the adrenaline goes down, the cortisol kicks in. And cortisol, which we call the stress hormone, actually keeps your system revved up and alert. That's not good. It's good to have that, but what's not good is if the cortisol remains and it keeps your body in that state of stress. Because think of it like a motor that's idling. Think of it as a motor that's idling too high for too long. What happens? It starts to break down. And that's what happens in the body. If you are feeling anxious too long, and if that system is working too long and running too hard, the result is what we were talking about at the beginning, which is that illness, 90% of illness coming from it. You see, all of that stuff that's going in your body, if it's focusing on that, it can't be doing other things that the body needs to do. And those kind of things, this is, again, my very simplistic way of understanding it and explaining it. If your body isn't able to do other things because it's keyed up in the stress response, then it's unable to take care of you in the other ways that it needs to. So we need to find ways when the stressor comes in and our automatic nervous system responds, we need ways to get out of that automatic nervous response and to get our cortisol to turn off. So we need to find ways that when we're feeling anxious, to drop our anxiety, and we need to find ways to increase our peace. And we need to be increasing our peace even on a regular basis. And the reason for that is a lot of our stressors are actually chronic. So for example, chronic stress is driving in traffic every day or prolonged periods of time. It's having a marriage that isn't doing well and you're living in it day and day and day and day and day. And sidebar, getting out of the marriage isn't necessarily going to eliminate the stress. It is going to eliminate some stressors, but it's also going to add new stressors. So I'm not advocating that that is a response. I'm also saying that I'm not saying either way, that you should or you shouldn't do that if that's a stressor. I'm just saying both could be. So staying in a marriage, leaving a marriage, both of those things are going to be stressors. And when you're in a relationship that isn't working, that can create chronic stress because over time, when you're in that anxious response all the time, that's what chronic stress can look like. Now, we talked about at the beginning that we're not eliminating all the stressors. There are too many things in life that we can't control and that we shouldn't probably even want to control. Because even the idea of trying to control everything, just trying to keep everything safe, is an anxious response. People that are feeling a lot of anxiety don't typically have a lot of spontaneity. It's one of the first things that goes. The idea of working on anxiety is to focus on things that you can actually shift. What can you change? What can you do that you can actually have an effect on? Because your body isn't meant to live in a heightened sense of anxiety for a long period of time. And our modern environment isn't always conducive to living in peace. But here's the best part. There are so many things you can do. There are so many people that are skilled at helping people with anxiety. There is freedom from uncontrollable reactions to stress. There is hope, and there are things that you can do. This is one of those mental health disorders that we are actually pretty good at treating. There are ways to make this manageable. I'm going to repeat that because this matters. You do not have to be a slave to that feeling of anxiety. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can get there. If this episode has spoke to you, if you are a person who feels like getting more of this information out matters, then I want to encourage you to respond to me, to let me know that this is something that you think we need to be talking more about. I've been tossing around the idea of creating a course for people that are experiencing anxiety, a course that they can take at their home, online, with some coaching related to overcoming experiences of anxiety. But I don't know if this is something that you would like from us. So I would love it if this is speaking to you and you are feeling like we need more of this, I need more of this. I want to encourage you to send me an email, go to the show description where you can get that information, and let me know if this is something you would like to learn more about. If this spoke to you, please like and please subscribe so that you don't miss any of the episodes that are connected to this mini-series about anxiety, where we are tackling ways to increase your peace, ways to reduce your anxiety. We also have a couple freebies that are connected to anxiety. You can get those in the show notes description. This is a podcast that is all about helping people become the people that they were meant to be. It is about personal growth, about personal development. And anxiety is one of those things that erodes and takes away opportunities to grow and to learn. This episode specifically is for information only and entertainment only. This is not to be construed as professional advice. Please reach out to a professional in your community if you are struggling with anxiety and you are not sure what to do next. Thank you for opening up your home or your car, wherever you're listening today, to share this with me. It's been an honor that you would let me into your life. My name is Amy McInnes, and this is The Art